The brass key my son handed me at closing scraped against the new front lock and stopped dead. My suitcase was already on the porch, standing upright beside a black trash bag full of my winter coats, and my late wife's quilt was folded on top like somebody was trying to make the eviction look polite. Through the beveled glass I could see my daughter-in-law, Claire, one hand on the hallway table, the other pressed to her mouth, like she was the one enduring something unbearable. My fingers shook so hard, the key clicked against the doorframe. Then I looked at my son behind her and said 6 words that changed the rest of that year. "You just triggered the default, Adam." I didn't know who had changed the locks, how far they'd already gone, or what Claire had told their marriage counselor about me. But I knew one thing with perfect clarity. That porch was only the beginning. If you've ever had family smile while cutting you out, stay with me and tell me where you would draw on the line, because the lock wasn't where this started. It started 3 months earlier with a sentence that floated down through a floor vent and landed in the middle of my chest. I was carrying 2 paper grocery bags up from the garage that night, one with milk and eggs, the other with the strawberries my granddaughter Sophie liked, only if I cut the tops off for her. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and browned butter. Claire had people over earlier for one of her neighborhood committee meetings, and she always lit the expensive candle after, the one that made the whole first floor smell like a hotel lobby. I was halfway through the mudroom when I heard her voice from the kitchen above me, flat and tired and mean in a way she usually saved for when she thought I was downstairs. "Your father is a burden, Adam. Not help, a burden." I stopped so hard the eggs tapped against each other in the carton. Adam said something I couldn't make out at first. The vent rattled. A chair leg scraped tile. Then I heard him clearly. "He gave us the down payment, Claire, and he never lets us forget it," she shot back. "He lives here. He takes up space. Sophie's attached to him. Your whole life bends around him, and now the counselor is telling us we need actual boundaries. I am not spending the next 15 years with your father in the basement like he's permanent furniture." Permanent furniture. The strawberries slipped in the bag and cold juice ran across my hand. I stood in the dark by the washer and dryer, listening to my son say nothing for so long that the silence itself became an answer. That should have been the moment I stormed upstairs. It wasn't. I carried the groceries into my little kitchen, put the milk in my fridge, rinsed the strawberry juice off my fingers, and sat down in the recliner I'd brought from the house my wife and I used to own. I remember staring at the lamp beside it. Nora had picked that lamp out at a church rummage sale in 1998 because the shade was crooked, and she liked things with a little history. I sat there and listened to the heat kick on. My chest hurt, but not in the dramatic way people describe. It felt more like a board had been laid across it and somebody had decided to stand there. 3 years before that, after Nora died, I sold the only house I had ever fully paid off. It was a narrow cape with creaky stairs, drafty windows, and a workbench in the garage I'd built myself from 2 salvage doors and a sheet of oak plywood. I raised Adam there. I buried the dog in the backyard there. Nora painted the kitchen yellow one April and said if we were going to argue over money, at least we should do it in a cheerful room. When cancer finished with her, the place got too quiet too fast. Every plate in the cabinet sounded like an accusation when I touched it. Every doorway kept the shape of her in it for a second too long. Adam was 38 then, and he and Claire had a 4-year-old and a mortgage that had started to chew through them. Interest rates had jumped. Claire's event planning business looked prettier from the outside than it did on paper. Adam said they had found a bigger colonial in Westfield with a legal in-law suite over the garage. Not a basement cave, he told me, smiling in that eager way he had when he wanted something and needed me to meet him there willingly. A real place. Separate entrance, full bath, little kitchenette. Your own space but with us. Claire did the soft voice then. "We can help each other, you'll have family around. Sophie adores you, it just makes sense." It did make sense, or enough of it did. I was 68, lonely, and not stupid enough to mistake loneliness for wisdom. I put $220,000 from the sale of my house into the purchase. I paid for the electrical work when the upstairs panel failed inspection. I spent 2 weekends repairing the deck railing and another crawling through insulation to run a cable line so Adam could work from home. At closing, When the papers were stacked and the coffee had gone cold in little paper cups, Adam pressed a brass key into my hand. It had a navy plastic tag on it from the hardware store. "This is your home too, Dad." I believed him so completely that I had to turn my face away for a second. There was paperwork, of course. Closing attorney, Meera Patel, was young enough to be my daughter, and practical enough to remind me that love and documents should not be enemies. She drafted an occupancy agreement and a recorded reimbursement lien for my contribution. If the property was sold, refinanced, or if my right to live there was interfered with, I was protected. Claire had smiled through it, but I still remember the tightness at the corners of her mouth. "Do we really need all this?" she asked. "He's family." Nora used to say people who loved you never minded paper if the paper was fair. I heard her voice that day and signed where Ms. Patel pointed. For the first year, it almost felt like the right choice. Sophie padded down to my suite in footed pajamas every Saturday morning and knocked in a rhythm she invented herself. I made pancakes with too much vanilla because that's how Nora made them. Adam and I changed brake pads together in the driveway. Claire asked me to watch Sophie during vendor calls and thanked me with good coffee and leftovers on white plates instead of paper ones. When she had clients over, I stayed downstairs or out in the yard because she liked clean flow. But I told myself that was ordinary. People have habits. Houses have traffic patterns. Not every slight is a wound until enough of them line up. Then they started lining up. The Christmas card photo was the first one I couldn't explain away. Claire had hired a photographer to come out to the front walk just after the first snow. She put Sophie in a cream coat with little velvet bows and Adam in a camel overcoat. He looked faintly embarrassed by. I came upstairs wearing the navy sweater Sophie liked because it was soft like a dog ear. And Claire glanced at me, smiled too quickly, and handed me the tripod. "Could you take a few of just us first?" she asked. "We'll do some grandparent ones after." I stood in the cold with my gloves off, taking pictures while my son put his arm around his wife, and their daughter laughed into the camera. Claire kept saying, "Perfect, perfect, these are beautiful." Then Sophie started to cry because her shoes were wet. The photographer said the light was going, and Claire touched my sleeve and said, "Rain check on yours, okay?" There was never a rain check. I told myself I was being oversensitive. Then my coffee mug disappeared from the upstairs cabinet. Then Claire asked if I could use the side entrance when her book club came over because the front hall felt crowded. Then Sophie, who copied whatever adults repeated often enough, called my rooms the apartment one week and the basement the next, even though they weren't below ground at all. What happened next made it worse, because it wasn't just omission anymore. It became revision. One afternoon, Claire asked me for a typed list of my medications. "Just for an emergency binder," she said brightly. "You know, allergies, doctors, insurance numbers, all the responsible stuff." I gave it to her because it sounded sensible. A week later, Adam asked if I had been forgetting to take my blood pressure pills. "No," I said. "Why?" He shrugged without looking at me. "Claire said she found yesterday's still in the organizer. I checked when I got downstairs. Tuesday's slot was open." I distinctly remembered taking it with toast. I stood there under my own under-cabinet lights, staring at that plastic organizer like it might explain itself. Another time, an appraiser showed up while I was trimming the hydrangeas by the front steps. He had a laser measure in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Here for the exterior review," he said. "For what?" He looked at his paper. "Property valuation update." Claire came out before I could ask another question. She laughed lightly and said it was just homeowner's insurance. The appraiser gave her a look that told me it wasn't his habit to referee lies. Then walked around back and finished his measurements. 2 days later, I found a glossy brochure in the kitchen recycling bin while I was crushing seltzer cans. Maple Trace Senior Living. Warm lighting, smiling couples, a piano in the common room, and a little chart comparing monthly care options. Somebody had bent the corner of the page marked Independent Suites. I carried it downstairs and set it on my table. I didn't sleep much that night. Then my mail started arriving already opened. The first time, it was a county tax notice tucked back into the envelope badly enough that the flap stayed lifted. Adam said Claire must have opened it by accident while sorting the stack. The second time, it was a letter from my cardiologist about a routine follow-up, and the crease was fresh enough that I could smell the glue. Please don't open my mail, I said at dinner. Claire set down her fork. Daniel, nobody is trying to violate your rights. We're just running a household, Daniel. She only used my first name when she wanted to remind me I was not in fact an equal adult under that roof. Adam sighed like I was making him late for something. Dad, it's not a federal case. No, I thought. Not yet. I still didn't know the shape of it then. I knew only that the house had changed temperature around me. Conversations stopped when I came upstairs. Claire lowered her voice when Sophie wandered near my suite. Adam began asking strangely careful questions. Did you already pay the water bill? Where'd you leave your truck keys? Have you thought about what you'd want long-term if your health changed? The last one came while he was loading the dishwasher. I dried my hands on the towel by the sink. My health hasn't changed. I'm just saying we should talk as a family. That word again. Family. Used the way people use decorative pillows. To soften something hard enough to bruise you. The private call came on a Tuesday at 11:14 in the morning, while I was replacing the weather stripping around my suite door. My phone lit up with a local number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me had been wound tight for weeks. I answered. Mr. Mercer, a woman said. My name is Dr. Mara Levin. I'm Adam and Claire's marriage counselor. Is this a bad time? For a second I thought I'd heard her wrong. I stood there with the strip of adhesive foam in one hand and my reading glasses halfway down my nose. I'm sorry, I said. Who? She repeated it, then added, I know this is unusual. I'd prefer not to leave details on voicemail, but I was hoping to speak with you briefly if you're comfortable. Nothing in my life had prepared me for my son's marriage counselor calling me in secret. I sat down at my little kitchen table. The chair legs scraped the tile loud enough to make my heart jump. Go ahead. Her voice was steady and careful, the voice of somebody who had learned how to say serious things without spilling them. I need to be clear that I cannot share confidential details from my client sessions. But your name has come up in connection with a proposed family meeting involving housing, medical decision-making, and documents they hope to discuss in my office. I looked at the open maple trace brochure still sitting under the fruit bowl, she continued. My office is not an appropriate setting for anyone to be pressured about residency, finances, or legal rights. Before you attend any such meeting, if you attend at all, I strongly recommend you speak with your own attorney and, if relevant, your own physician, not theirs. Yours. The room went very still. I said the first thing that came out. Did Claire tell Adam I'm a burden? Silence traveled down the line and sat between us. She didn't answer that question directly. Instead, she said softly, Mr. Mercer, needing support from family, or having contributed to a shared household, does not make you less entitled to safety or dignity. And if anyone suggests that therapy recommended removing you from your home, that would be inaccurate. The weather stripping slipped from my hand and curled on the floor like a dead thing. What documents? I asked. I can't discuss that, she said. But I was concerned enough by how the conversation was framed that I felt you should not walk into anything unrepresented. My throat tightened. Do they say I'm confused? Another beat of silence. You do not sound confused to me, she said. You sound like a man who needs independent advice quickly. That was the moment I stopped hoping it was misunderstanding. After we hung up, I sat there staring at the refrigerator door where Sophie's drawings were held up by fruit-shaped magnets. One was a picture of me with orange hands because she always colored skin too warmly. In it I had a square body, 3 eyelashes, and what was either a smile or a mustache. Underneath, in crooked letters, she had written, Grandpa fixes everything. I cried then, but not long. Just enough to get the poison out of my eyes. Then I got up, went to the cedar chest at the foot of my bed, and pulled out the closing binder. The pages still smelled faintly like toner and dust. There was my contribution statement. There was the recorded occupancy agreement. There was the reimbursement lien. And there, on page 9, under language I had skimmed 3 years earlier because I trusted my son, was the clause that mattered. Any material interference with my residential access triggered immediate default remedies, including legal action to restore access or force repayment on sale terms. I read it twice. Then I called Meera Patel. She remembered me before I finished saying my name. Mr. Mercer, is everything all right? No, I said. I think I'm being managed. There was a short pause. Come in at 2. Mira's office sat above a bakery that made the whole staircase smell like sugar and yeast. I brought the binder, the opened mail, the brochure, and the little legal pad sheet I had found that morning in the garage recycling bin, with 3 words written in Claire's neat slanted script. Capacity letter, POA staging. Mira read without interrupting, only once pushing her glasses back up the bridge of her nose with the side of her thumb. When I finished telling her about Dr. Levin's call, she leaned back and folded her hands. First, she said, do not sign anything. Second, stop relying on the household mailbox. Open a post office box today. Third, schedule a cognitive baseline with your doctor if you can do it quickly. It shouldn't be necessary, but if someone is trying to build a narrative, we don't let them write the only draft. I nodded. My jaw had been clenched so long it ached. Fourth, she added, and now her tone sharpened, last week someone requested a blank release form for your recorded lien from the title company. Bakery smell turned sour in my stomach. Who? They wouldn't confirm over the phone, but it was tied to the property file. I can get it formally if needed. I stared at her. They were trying to strip my protection. Maybe, she said, or exploring how. Either way, you came in at the right time. That line sat with me the rest of the day. You came in at the right time, not too early, not too late. Right when the fog was clearing and the shape inside it was ugly enough to name. I got the P.O. box. I called my doctor and scheduled the soonest evaluation he could fit me in. I moved my savings into an account Claire had never seen because I had once made the mistake of letting Adam put me as a household contact for convenience. I took pictures of every room in my suite, every piece of furniture, every tool in my cabinet, every box of Nora's things stacked neatly in the closet. I didn't do it dramatically. I did it the way you sand a board before paint. Patiently. Thoroughly. So whatever came next would have something solid to grip. 3 evenings later, I agreed to attend one session in Dr. Levin's office. I went because I wanted to look my son in the face while he did this. I wanted to know whether he had become cruel or merely weak. Those are different sins, even if they burn the same when they hit you. Claire dressed for the occasion the way she dressed for school fundraisers. Cream blouse, gold hoops, small cross necklace right at the collarbone. Adam looked gray around the eyes. Dr. Levin greeted me warmly but kept the room formal. There were 2 couches, 1 chair, a box of tissues on the low table, and a framed print of beach grass bending in wind. Claire sat with her ankles crossed and her hands folded like she was waiting for a jury to settle. She started before anyone asked her to. We love Daniel, she said, using that first name again, but the current arrangement is putting strain on our marriage and confusion on Sophie. We think it may be time to discuss a transition into something more supportive. Supportive, I repeated. Adam looked at the carpet. Dad, we've all been under pressure. What confusion on Sophie? I asked. Claire let out a little breath through her nose. She's becoming overly attached downstairs. It's blurring boundaries. Dr. Levin spoke then, calm and precise. I want to clarify that my role here is relational, not legal or residential. I am not recommending that anyone sign documents, relinquish housing, or accept a care plan. A pink color rose up Claire's neck. Adam tried to bridge it. No one said you were. You implied it, I said. He finally looked at me. There was shame there. I'll give him that. Shame and fatigue and something else I didn't recognize until later. Fear. Claire pressed on because people like her always believe polish can outlast truth if they keep talking. This is exactly why we struggle. Every concern becomes an accusation. We're not attacking you, Daniel. We're asking for a healthier structure. There's a lovely place called Maple Trace. I found the brochure, I said. She stopped. Dr. Levin didn't blink. This is no longer a productive conversation. That should have ended it. It didn't. The next morning, someone unplugged the small freezer in my kitchenette. I found it because water had crept across the tile and under the rubber mat by the sink. The package of chicken I kept for soup had gone soft. So had the frozen peas. Sophie liked to pour into bowls and eat half-thawed because she was 7 and weird in the lovable way children are weird. I plugged it back in and stood there listening to the compressor struggle back to life. When I asked upstairs, Claire said maybe I had bumped the cord while vacuuming. I had not vacuumed in 4 days. The day after that, my truck was blocked in by Adam's SUV and Claire's leased crossover for 3 hours while they were both too busy to move them. The day after that, Sophie came down after school with a paper snowflake she had made in art class and asked me, "Grandpa, are you moving to the place with the piano?" I felt the air leave me. "Who told you that?" She looked instantly scared, not because of me but because she knew the answer was dangerous. "Mommy said maybe, if it helps everybody." I crouched down slowly because my knees don't forgive sudden movements anymore. "Honey, listen to me. None of this is your fault. Do you understand?" She nodded, lower lip trembling. I pinned the snowflake to the bulletin board by my door after she went upstairs. I still have it. 2 days later, I went to my doctor, passed every test he gave me, and walked out with a signed note stating I was fully oriented, medically stable, and independently competent in my own affairs. I drove straight to Mira's office and handed it to her. "Good," she said. "Now if they try to paint you as impaired, they'll have to do it against a clean record. It should comfort a man to hear that the truth is documented." It doesn't. Not when you've reached the age where other people think documentation can outrank your own mouth. I thought I had a little time after that. I was wrong. The lockout happened on a Friday at 5:20. After I picked Sophie up from violin, Claire met us in the driveway before I had even shut off the truck. She had Sophie's backpack already in her hand, and her smile was stretched so thin it looked painful. "I'll take her," she said. Sophie slid across the seat toward me instead. "Grandpa's coming in." "No," Claire said, still smiling. "Grandpa's staying with a friend tonight." I turned off the engine and looked at her. "What are you talking about?" That was when I saw the suitcase on the porch. Not packed badly. Packed by somebody who had taken their time. My shirts folded, my shaving kit zipped. Nora's quilt placed on top. The indecency of the care in it made me almost dizzy. Adam came to the doorway but didn't come down the steps. "Dad," he said, "we need some space to reset this." My left hand went numb around the keys. "Reset what?" Claire answered because he couldn't. "This arrangement." Sophie started crying then, the panicked little breathless crying children do when the world tilts faster than they can catch it. I got out of the truck, walked her to her mother, and kissed the top of her head. Claire tried to steer her inside, but Sophie reached one arm back toward me. I can still see her mittens swinging in the cold air. Then I went to the porch, picked up the brass key from my ring, and learned it no longer fit. You already know what I said next. "You just triggered the default, Adam." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. I called Mira from the driveway. Claire crossed her arms and said, "Please don't make this uglier than it has to be." I looked at the quilt, at the lock, at my son standing in the house I had helped buy, and for the first time since Nora died, something in me went absolutely still. "Claire," I said, "you changed the locks on a man you wanted to call a burden. You should have looked up what burden means." Mira told me to leave everything exactly where it was. Photograph the door, the changed lock, the packed belongings, and the witnesses if possible. She arranged a hotel for the night through a colleague because she did not want me sleeping in my truck out of pride. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "we move." I barely slept. Not from grief. From clarity. By 8 the next morning, Mira had filed an emergency petition, a notice of interference, and a lis pendens against the property. At 9:30 she called and asked one question. "Do you want back in, or do you want out with enforcement?" That was harder than I expected. There are humiliations so complete they cure your nostalgia. "I want my rights enforced," I said. "And I don't want to live where a child can watch adults do that and call it normal." Then we proceed. What I didn't know yet was that Claire had already invited a realtor for a same-day pre-listing strategy meeting, thinking they were moving faster than I could. Mira found that out from the filing rush. Apparently, once legal notices started hitting inboxes, people began calling each other in a panic. So at 1:15 that afternoon, I walked back up the front path with Mira on one side of me and a sheriff's deputy on the other. Claire's mother's white Mercedes was in the driveway. So was a black Lexus with a magnetic Realty logo on the door. Through the front window I could see movement in the dining room, and the edge of a charcuterie board laid out on butcher paper, as if this were a tasteful little planning brunch, and not the scene of a family betrayal. The deputy rang once. Adam opened the door. I have never seen a face lose color that fast. "Dad, step aside," the deputy said. The dining room smelled like coffee, brie, and furniture polish. Claire stood near the sideboard with a legal pad in hand. Her father was at the table in a golf pullover, confused and annoyed to find the afternoon had become real. The realtor, a woman with silver hair and a leather portfolio, looked from Mira to me to the deputy and did the mental math of commission versus catastrophe. Claire recovered first. "This is insane," she said. "We were trying to handle this privately." Mira placed a folder on the table and opened it with the kind of calm that makes dishonest people reckless. "No," she said. "You attempted a self-help lockout of a protected occupant with recorded residential rights and a reimbursement interest in the property. As of this morning, the property is under notice. It cannot be sold or refinanced free of my client's claims. Here is the filed lis pendens. Here is the petition. Here is the documentation of the lock change and exclusion." The realtor took one step back from the table. Adam looked at me, then at the papers, then at Claire. "What does that mean?" Claire snapped. "It means he's overreacting." "No," Mira said, and slid another document across. "It means your father's legal protections were triggered the moment you denied him access. Under the agreement you both signed at closing, interference creates default remedies. My client may re-enter, compel compliance, or force resolution through sale and repayment. Given last night's conduct, we will not be choosing the cozy option." The last line landed hard. Claire's father picked up the top page and frowned. "Repayment of what?" My voice surprised even me when I answered. It was level. "The $220,000 I put into this house. Plus costs. Plus whatever else the court decides your daughter's lockout bought her." Claire's mother stared at her. "You said he was just helping with utilities." There it was. The first crack moving through her polished little wall. Claire's eyes flashed. "This is why we couldn't talk to him. He turns everything into leverage." I laughed then once. It was not a pleasant sound. "Leverage, Claire? I sold my house so your daughter could grow up with a yard. I rewired your kitchen so it would pass inspection. I watched Sophie while you built a business out of linen napkins and panic. I stood in the snow taking your Christmas card pictures because you said we'd get mine later, and you packed my life into garbage bags while I was at violin lessons." Nobody moved. Adam swallowed. The counselor said we needed boundaries. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not because it won the argument, because it told me exactly how he had been soothing himself. I looked him straight in the eye. "Your counselor called me privately, Adam. She told me to get my own lawyer before either of you tried to put housing papers in front of me." Claire's face changed. Not the theatrical kind of shock. The real kind. The kind that happens when a liar suddenly realizes a sealed room has a second door. "You did what?" Adam said, turning to her. Claire's mouth opened and closed once. She had no right. "So there were papers," Mira said quietly. Claire's father put the page down. "Claire." She straightened, angry now because the elegant version had died. "Yes, there were papers. Because this wasn't working. Because he has made our marriage revolve around him. Because every room in this house carries his needs, his moods, his schedule, his grief. Because Sophie runs to him first. Because you," she pointed at Adam, "never chose us." There it was at last. Not practicality, not concern, competition. Adam stared at her like he had been hit with cold water. I spoke before he could find a softer excuse to hide in. "You called me a burden." Her chin lifted. "You are one." The word sat in the room like a drop plate. Her mother closed her eyes. The realtor slowly shut her portfolio. The deputy didn't react at all, which somehow made it worse. I stepped closer to the table, close enough to touch the brass bowl, Claire filled with decorative lemons every spring. "A burden," I said, "is something you carry without choice. I was the foundation under this address, and you mistook my patience for weakness." Then Mira laid down the final piece. "In addition," she said, "the title company confirmed a recent request for a release form related to Mr. Mercer's recorded interest. If any effort was made to prepare or submit that without his informed consent, we will pursue that separately." Adam turned fully toward Claire now. "You said that was just for information." "It was," she snapped, "because somebody in this house had to think ahead." "To what?" I asked. "The part where I'm confused enough to sign away my home, before I notice." He looked wrecked. Older, suddenly. Smaller, too. "Claire, did you tell Sophie he was moving to a home?" Her answer came out tired and ugly. I told her what needed to happen. Her father pushed back from the table so sharply the chair legs barked on hardwood. "Do not drag a child into this. Do not lie to us about money. And do not ever describe a man's contribution to a roof as utilities if his money paid for the roof. That was the second crack. The public one. Claire started talking faster then, the way people do when control leaves through every seam at once. About stress. About privacy. About the strain of multi-generational living. About how I made them feel watched. About how Adam never put her first. Some of it may even have been true in the ordinary, human sense. Shared houses are hard. Grief is awkward. Marriage bends under pressure. But truth wrapped around cruelty does not purify cruelty. It only helps it travel farther before anyone stops it. Mira let the torrent run out, then said, "Here are your options. Restore immediate access under written conditions pending litigation, or prepare for court-ordered resolution. My client is not discussing senior housing. He is not signing powers of attorney. He is not relinquishing occupancy in exchange for a motel brochure and sentiment." The realtor raised one hand slightly, as if asking permission in a classroom. "I'm going to step out of this engagement." Nobody tried to stop her. And then came the part I did not expect. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs in mismatched socks, holding the paper snowflake she'd made in art class. "Grandpa," she said. Every adult in that room froze. Claire turned too late. Sophie came down one step, then another, eyes wide and wet. "Are you in trouble? I have lived through funerals, layoffs, surgeries, and the slow ruin of a good woman's body. Very little has ever cut me like that sentence." I knelt, because I wanted my answer to land at her height. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I'm fixing something." She clutched the snowflake tighter. "Can you still read to me tonight?" Claire started to say something. Adam held out an arm without looking at her. "Yes," I told Sophie. "Just not here." That, more than the legal language, ended it. Children have a way of stripping adults back to the plain version of themselves. In front of a deputy, a lawyer, her own parents, her husband, and the little girl she had tried to narrate around, Claire was no longer a polished woman managing family complexity. She was a person who had put a grandfather's suitcase on a porch and taught a child to call removal help. By Monday, the court granted temporary restoration and non-interference. By Wednesday, Adam called asking if I would consider a buyout instead of moving back in. "No," I said. "I'm done living where I have to prove I belong." So we forced the harder path. The house went on the market under court pressure 6 weeks later, not for the dreamy number Claire had once circled on printouts, but for what it could honestly fetch with legal smoke still hanging around its history. After repayment of my contribution, fees, and costs, I had enough to buy a small brick duplex on the east side of town with a narrow porch, a real maple out front, and a kitchen just big enough for one person to cook without feeling lonely in it. Adam and Claire did not survive the sale. I'm not saying I caused their divorce. I'm saying the truth arrived, and their marriage had nowhere left to hide from it. He learned about more debt than she had admitted, and she learned that weakness in a man can look a lot like support right up until the day it stops. Last I heard, she moved closer to her parents. Good for geography, maybe less good for narrative control. As for Adam, remorse did not make him noble, it made him late. His first real apology came 3 months after the house sold. No speeches, no mention of stress, no "if you felt hurt." He stood on my porch in a wrinkled blue shirt with Sophie beside him holding a library book and said, "I heard her say it, and I still let it happen." I don't know how to ask for more than a chance to keep showing up. I didn't forgive him on the spot. Some people think forgiveness is a door you either fling open or nail shut. It's not. Sometimes it's a bench outside the door where you make someone sit long enough to see if they understand the house they almost burned down. But I let him come in. Now Sophie keeps slippers by my radiator and a toothbrush in the bathroom drawer. On Saturdays, she still knocks in that ridiculous rhythm on my kitchen wall before barging in. We read on the couch that fits exactly 2 people if one of them is small and insists on leaning sideways. Sometimes Adam comes by with groceries and stands awkwardly at the counter until I give him something practical to do, which is the closest thing men like us have to easy conversation. The snowflake from art class is pinned above my desk. Nora's crooked lamp sits in the corner of the living room, and on a hook by my front door hang 2 keys. One is the new house key, bright and clean and honest. The other is that old brass key with the navy plastic tag, the one my son once pressed into my hand and called home. I keep it there for a reason, because a lock can fail you before a person admits they have. Because people can use family like a blanket while they drag you into the cold. And because the day that key stopped working was the day I finally understood something my wife had spent years trying to teach me. Love does not ask you to disappear to prove you care. Now when I come home, my key turns smoothly. The other one just hangs there, quiet and useless. And I leave it that way so I never forget the difference.